The most dangerous moment of the Cold War was not the Cuban Missile Crisis. It was November 1983, and most people have never heard of it. A NATO training exercise, a Soviet intelligence program running at maximum paranoia, and one Soviet officer who received a computer alert showing 5 American nuclear missiles in flight and decided, correctly, that it was a false alarm. Only one side knew they were in a crisis. The side that knew was the one closest to launching. This episode is about how that happened and how close it came. Understanding the 1983 crisis requires understanding what preceded it. The Reagan administration entered office in 1981 with a specific posture toward the Soviet Union, confrontational, rhetorically aggressive, and its early years genuinely alarming to Soviet leadership. Reagan called the Soviet Union the evil empire. His administration deployed Pershing II missiles in Western Europe. It announced the Strategic Defense Initiative, the missile defense program the Soviets called Star Wars. From Moscow's perspective, these were not rhetorical positions. They were indicators of a strategic shift that KGB chairman Yuri Andropov interpreted as preparation for an American first strike. That interpretation drove everything that followed. Operation Ryan, Raketno Yadernoi Napadeny, meaning nuclear missile attack, was launched in 1981 as the largest peacetime intelligence collection program in KGB history. Every KGB and GRU residency worldwide was tasked with monitoring specific indicators that the Americans were preparing a first strike. The indicators were specific and documented: unusual activity at military bases, changes in communications patterns, movement of blood supplies near command centers, unusual purchases of food or fuel by military facilities. The logic was sound. The problem was that the indicators could be triggered by exercises, seasonal patterns, or coincidence, producing false positives that a paranoid system would interpret as confirmation of the threat it was designed to detect. The KGB's Ryan reporting created a self-reinforcing feedback loop. Residencies under pressure to report indicators of American first strike preparation found ways to interpret ambiguous data as confirmation. Officers who reported nothing were questioned. Officers who reported concerning indicators were praised. The system was architecturally designed to produce the finding it was created to prevent. It generated increasing confidence in an imminent American attack that did not exist. British intelligence learned about Ryan from Oleg Gordievsky, the KGB's London deputy resident, who was simultaneously a British double agent. His reporting gave MI6 and then the CIA the first detailed picture of how seriously Soviet leadership had constructed the threat. The picture was alarming. Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov was the duty officer at Serpukhov 15 on the night of September 26, 1983. At 12:15 a.m., the OCO early warning satellite system triggered an alert. 1 American ICBM launch detected. Then another. Then 3 more. 5 missiles. The system's confidence level highest. The protocol was explicit. Report immediately to superiors, who would relay to senior military command, who would relay to the Soviet leadership for a response decision. Petrov had minutes. The launch to impact time for American missiles from submarine launched positions, approximately 15 minutes. The entire Soviet response chain had to operate within that window. Petrov did not report. His reasoning documented in his own later accounts. The Soviet early warning system had known reliability problems. A genuine American first strike would involve hundreds of missiles, not 5. 5 missiles was not a rational first strike profile. It was too few to be decisive, which made it more likely to be a false alarm than a real attack. He held the telephone. He reported to his superiors that the system had generated a false alarm. He was correct. The OCO satellite had detected sunlight reflecting off high-altitude clouds. A known technical glitch the system had not fully resolved. The protocol said, report it. His judgment said, don't. His judgment was right. 6 weeks after Petrov's decision, NATO conducted Able Archer 83, an annual command post exercise simulating the escalation from conventional to nuclear conflict. The 1983 iteration was different from previous years in ways that Soviet intelligence, filtered through Ryan's paranoid framework, read as potentially genuine. It used new communications procedures. It included realistic simulation of nuclear release authorization. It involved senior political figures, including in some phases, simulated participation at the level of heads of government. For Soviet intelligence running Ryan, the combination of new procedures, political involvement, and realistic nuclear release simulation looked less like a training exercise and more like the specific cover a real attack might use. The KGB's London residency sent an urgent cable to Moscow during Able Archer 83. The exercise might be cover for a real attack. Soviet nuclear forces in Eastern Europe, specifically the SS-20 missile units in East Germany and Czechoslovakia, were placed on heightened alert. Aircraft were loaded with nuclear weapons. The specific response, not a launch, but a preparation for launch that required only a command to execute. Western intelligence did not know this was happening in real time. The information came from Gordievsky weeks later. When CIA Director William Casey read the full account, his documented response was, "We did not know. We came very close." The American intelligence failure during Able Archer 83 was specific and documented. The CIA and DIA did not have adequate visibility into Soviet operational military responses to the exercise. They knew the Soviets monitored NATO exercises. They did not know the Soviets had reached a level of genuine operational readiness in response to this specific exercise. Gordievsky's reporting, passed through MI6 to the CIA in early 1984, produced what became known as the SNI, Special National Intelligence Estimate, on Soviet war scare perceptions. The CIA's assessment, later partially declassified, concluded that the Soviet leadership's fear of American first strike was genuine, not performative, and that the danger of miscalculation was real and present. The Gordievsky assessment changed Reagan's posture. This is documented in Reagan's own diary entries, declassified and published, where he wrote in late 1983 that he had been surprised to learn Soviet leadership genuinely feared an American attack, and that he needed to find ways to signal that the United States was not planning one. Reagan subsequently pursued more direct communication with Soviet leadership, culminating in the Geneva Summit of 1985 and the Reykjavik Summit of 1986. The specific causal chain, Gordievsky's intelligence, the Able Archer assessment, Reagan's diary entry, the Geneva Summit, is one of the clearest documented cases of intelligence directly changing ahead of government's strategic posture. Stanislav Petrov was not decorated for his decision. He was reprimanded. The specific reason he had not filled in his duty log correctly during the incident. The Soviet military's response to the most consequential act of judgment in its history was a procedural criticism. He was transferred from his operational post. He retired in 1984. He lived on a modest pension in Fryazevo outside Moscow for the following decades. His role in the September 26th incident was unknown outside a small circle of Soviet military officials until 1998, when a Russian journalist published the account. He did not seek recognition. The recognition eventually found him. In later years, Petrov received international recognition, the Dresden Peace Prize, a United Nations presentation, meetings with international leaders. He was asked repeatedly in interviews whether he considered himself a hero. His consistent answer was no. He had done his job, he said. But it was his job that had been wrong because his job required him to report what the system showed, and he had instead used his judgment. He believed the protocol was flawed, not that he had been heroic. He died in May 2017. His death was not announced publicly for several months. The man who may have prevented nuclear war died quietly, and the world did not immediately notice. The specific lesson of September 26, 1983, beyond the personal story of Petrov, is structural. Every nuclear early warning system contains, at some point in its chain, a human judgment element. It cannot be fully automated because full automation requires trusting the system's confidence ratings completely, which Petrov correctly identified as unreliable. It cannot be fully human because human judgment under the time pressure of a 15-minute launch-to-impact window is systematically degraded by stress, sleep deprivation, and information overload. The system is designed to create impossible conditions for the judgment it requires. That design flaw has not been fully resolved in any nuclear-armed state's early warning architecture since 1983. The 1983 crisis produced one documented policy change: increased direct communication between American and Soviet leadership to reduce the risk of misread exercises. The hotline was upgraded. Procedures for notifying the other side about major exercises were improved. These were meaningful changes. They did not address the underlying structural issue, nuclear arsenals large enough that a decision to launch must be made within minutes, using systems that can malfunction, interpreted by humans under conditions that impair judgment. The Cuban Missile Crisis produced 13 days of negotiation. The 1983 crisis produced no negotiation at all because only one side knew it was happening. The lesson of asymmetric crisis awareness is the most important nuclear risk lesson of the Cold War. It has not been fully absorbed. Operation Ryan's legacy is the specific demonstration that intelligence systems designed to detect threats can generate those threats from their own operation. The paranoia Ryan encoded, the requirement to find indicators of American first strike preparation, produced increasing confidence in an attack that did not exist, which produced alert postures that, if observed by American intelligence, would have generated American alert responses, which would have provided Ryan with the indicators it was looking for. The feedback loop was self-completing. This is not unique to the Cold War. Every intelligence system that is designed to confirm a threat hypothesis, rather than test it, runs the same risk. Ryan made it visible because the stakes were nuclear. One intelligence program, one training exercise, one satellite malfunction, one man who did not pick up a telephone. The most dangerous moment of the Cold War, and most people have never heard of it. Stanislav Petrov died in 2017. His death was not announced for months. The structural problem his decision exposed. A nuclear early warning system requiring human judgment under conditions that degrade it remains unresolved in 2026 in every nuclear armed state on Earth. Series D continues with Episode 5, the Cambridge Five. The 5 British intelligence officers who gave Soviet intelligence access to the highest levels of MI5, the Foreign Office, and the CIA for 30 years. Not one operation, 30 years of continuous penetration, the most damaging intelligence failure in Western history. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because the story doesn't end here, it evolves. The operations are documented. The structural lessons are still being argued over. And the facility that Petrov worked in is still running somewhere, right now, on the night shift.